Greetings and welcome to another edition of Talkable San Leandro, a series of conversations with people in our community who are making a difference. Today we have the pleasure to talk with Cindy Simmons. She is the co-president of the San Leandro Historical Society. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, great. You know, I've been wanting to talk to you because I'm a bit of a history buff, so we're going to get into talking about the Historical Society and then some details of San Leandro history, but I'd like to hear a little about your history. Kind of the coming of age story. Where did you grow up?
I am a military brat, so I grew up all over the world. My father was in the Air Force in World War II as a fighter pilot.
So you were born?
I was born in California,
okay,
but he was out of the service for 2 years after the war and then rejoined. And so I lived in Okinawa, in Germany,
wow,
back east, and all over the place.
Good. And then what was your trajectory, your path back to California and San Leandro?
He was at Travis Air Force Base when I was in high school, and then last couple years of high school we were in Florida.
Okay.
And I was not comfortable in the South. I actually went to a segregated all-white high school.
Wow.
Back in the bad old days.
Yeah.
And hightailed it back to California to come to college. I was so happy to be back in a state that was a little more liberal.
Where did you go to college?
My undergraduate degree is at UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And my in history.
History.
Yeah.
It started early.
Yes,
it started
it did.
early. And so your interest in history, did it blossom in college, or were you always kind of a history buff?
I think it blossomed in college, but I think the roots actually go back to the fact that my mother's ancestors, she traces herself all the way back to Ethan Allen, who was a Revolutionary War hero.
Wow.
And had ancestors who came over the Oregon Trail in wagon trains to settle in Oregon back in the 1840s. And my dad had a more recent immigrant story. His dad was from Crete, left Greece as a young man in the early 1900s, and married his what we would now call ESL teacher, his English language teacher, and ended up in California on a little farm up in Roberta. So both my parents have history in their past.
Yeah, and I think that when you get acquainted with that, it's hard not to become fascinated with their story, and their story is the story of a city, a nation, and it was like that for me, essentially. I had a string of terrible history teachers, but I had one that made it to really live, and from that point forward, I was always curious. So tell us a little about the San Leandro Historical Society. How long has it been here?
It started in the early 1980s. It's an all-volunteer organization.
Okay. So we're talking to you, volunteers.
Absolutely. It is a 501c3, so we are a charitable organization. We are entirely funded by member dues and by donations and by the occasional grant.
Okay.
We have about 90 members at this point.
Okay. And there's that fundraiser once a year?
We have a fundraiser once a year. Yes.
The dinner. Sure.
And we chase after the occasional grant.
Okay, good. And your preview of what you're overseeing, I know the Little Brown Church is something we're taking care of.
Yes.
But how are you involved in the history room at the library and?
No, that's a good question. The city of San Leandro owns both the Casa Peralta, San Leandro's Historic House Museum, and the San Leandro History Museum.
Okay.
And the library is responsible for both of those and the history room.
Okay.
So it's the city of San Leandro that does that. And one of the reasons that I got involved with San Leandro history is because I worked as a librarian for many years at the library, and one of my responsibilities was local history.
Right.
I started out with learning to train and oversee the Casa Peralta docents, which was my first dive into local history.
Okay.
And then I had projects around town, like doing the photos and text for the San Leandro History Walk, and taking care of the San Leandro History Room, setting that up when the library was remodeled and opened.
You had a hand in setting that up.
Yes, and then when they decided to do the local museum, I was honored and quite pleased to be able to curate the first permanent exhibits.
Right.
So that was really a deep dive into San Leandro history and really fun.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that the book that you authored, did you author this on your own, Images of America and San Leandro?
I did. When I retired from the library, because of all those history projects I had so much fun with, and because I had all that history knowledge, I thought, well, I should do something with this. So Images of America had contacted me before that to see if I would do one of their series. They've carved out this little niche of local history books.
Yeah, it's a brilliantly written. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
There is nothing like driving around this city, or just and kind of knowing what happened in the past. There's a feeling of place here that you can't get without that.
Right.
And so I'm just curious. I mean, what do you think having a historical society kind of gives to a city? How does it change the dynamics, do you think, even in the smallest ways?
I think, like you just said, when I drive around town, I can't drive down East 14th Street without imagining a Spanish carretzo, their ox cart, that big heavy wooden cart carrying cattle hides from the days when these were ranchos, or the streetcar that used to run from Hayward to Oakland, and probably get you there faster than you can get there in a car in commute traffic these days.
Sure.
So I have those pictures in my mind, and I think there is a sense of belonging that comes when you know about what was here before you. You know about the people who created this community that you live in, and you are creating a community for the future. So I really think that preserving the past enriches the future, and I think the really important thing is it gives you a sense of community, of belonging to a place that is unique and special, and gives you a part of that.
Yeah, in the sense that you're a participant in the continuing history, and we have a part to play today.
We do.
In kind of maintaining that history and pushing it forward. And
absolutely.
So, and I feel the same way. So tell us a little bit about kind of the San Leandro history, if we can kind of take a quick spin through early times.
Well, I tend to divide it up into layers. I think of first of the native people that were here for thousands of years. The Ohlone people, we call them today, although even today we've sort of broken that up into the small tribes, because they did not think of themselves as the Ohlone. That wasn't adopted until about the 1970s. Spanish called them the Costeños, which meant the coast people, and they wanted to get their own name, so they used the Ohlone to describe all those people with the same language group around the bay.
Sure.
But yeah, they lived near the springs where Fairmount Hospital is. They had a village there. They would go up into the hills to gather acorns in the fall, and they would have temporary camps down by the bay to collect oysters when it was oyster time.
Sounds like an idyllic life.
Well, I think probably no life is idyllic, but California has abundant resources,
it's plentiful,
and they had developed really amazing ways to take advantage of those resources.
Were they peaceful people? Do you know?
For the most part, yes. Not without conflict, but
But mostly, I've understood that it was peaceful. Resources were abundant, so apparently not a lot of necessity to fight over resources. And then so rolling forward.
So then the Spanish came. Spain had claimed the colony of California very early on in the 1500s, but ignored it for centuries, and then decided, because Russia was nosing down trapping furs.
Even back then, Russia.
France was sending ships out into the Pacific, and so they got a little worried that somebody would snatch this colony away, even though they hadn't done anything with it. So they sent the expedition that brought Junipero Serra to found the first mission. And they strung those missions up California along with their forts and their towns. And of course, the missions were devastating to the native people. Diseases and outright murder and hard work and many things they weren't used to. But then this area became a rancho, became two ranchos really. The San Leandro Creek was the dividing line between Rancho San Antonio, which belonged to the Peraltas, and Rancho San Leandro, which belonged to the Estudillos. So that was a time of cattle, thousands of cattle roaming the hill, thousands of horses. Very Spanish patriarchal family, very important to the Spanish.
And then, then in the gold rush times, I understand that the creek became a squatter's kind of, what happened there?
So many people poured into California. It was one of the most massive immigrations in the world, from all over the world, mostly from the United States, of course, but from all over the world. And then the United States went to war with Mexico and won that war, so we acquired California in 1848 and became a state in 1850. And all of those people coming in to look for gold, many of them were smart enough to realize standing in a cold, miserable creek up in the Sierra foothills was a lot harder than being down here selling things to the miners that were going up there. So many of them squatted along San Leandro Creek, as you said. It was called Squatterville in old maps. They were a problem for the Peraltas and the Estudillos. And so many people came pouring into the area that one of the Estudillo sons-in-law, William Heath Davis, who is a whole story in himself, and I'm not going to launch into that one, Davis Street is named for him.
Okay.
He came to live with his father-in-law and mother-in-law. The father-in-law soon died, and Davis sort of dealt with the squatters. He was an American, spoke English, but had been in Mexican California as a trader for decades. So he knew the Spanish families, married the Estudillo daughter, and he really developed the town of San Leandro. He and his other brother-in-law, John Ward.
And what year was that?
That was in the 1850s, early 1850s. They built an elegant hotel and restaurant called the Estudillo House, where the Sizzler is today.
A little step down, but hey, that's all right.
Right, the changes always happen.
Right.
But that was the focal point for almost 3/4 of a century in downtown San Leandro. Wow. They started selling lots. There was a bar at the other corner of the plaza, and the plaza just became this place where San Leandro developed around. The little town of San Leandro grew up and became the county seat.
The county seat, because the courthouse was right.
The courthouse was right there.
Right there,
as
where
a matter of fact,
St. Leandro
here's
is?
the Alameda County Courthouse.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah.
And the earthquake, there was an earthquake.
The earthquake, 1868 earthquake. Here's the courthouse after the earthquake.
Knocking on wood here. After the earthquake.
Right. Yeah, it was devastating. Now, one of my favorite speakers that we had as an event told us about the 1868 earthquake. He had some great stories and photos, but...
Yeah. I see you have a picture of the Little Brown Church.
True, the Little Brown Church. There were many churches built in San Leandro in the days when I was growing up. This was part of the First Presbyterian Church. To give you an idea of what that looked like, here's the First Presbyterian Church. It was on Park Street.
This is the chapel. Is it
the church is gone, but this little piece right here, the Sunday school wing, stayed. It was a missionary school for a while, and then the San Leandro Historical Society acquired it and brought it down the street behind the Casa
And where was it prior to?
2 blocks down Clark.
2 blocks down.
Yeah.
Clark.
So the city let us move it on to this lot where it is now. And as you can see, it's not brown and it's no longer a church, but it's still called the Little Brown Church. It's going to be brown very soon. We're very excited that we are going to be painting any day now. I called the painter yesterday and said, let's get going.
We'll solve that little problem.
Our Little Brown Church will be at least brown.
Good. What color trim? Brown as well?
Brown. It's various shades of brown. And then here's an interior view of the church today with the Questers ladies who gave us a donation some years ago to refinish our windows.
Nice. Now, is the Little Brown Church, do you rent it out, or is it?
We do. You can rent it for weddings or other events.
Because there's a little park around it?
Well, it's on the Casa Peralta lot. So if you want to use the Casa Peralta grounds, you have to rent that as well from the city of San Leandro. But you can use our little space if you don't want to use that space. We have this little courtyard in the front with brick, and then the building itself. So
great. Well, listen, this has been a pleasure talking to you about this. And how would people get in contact with the Historical Society?
The best way is on the website, www.sanleandrohistory.org.
I'll post that on
that would be
on
great.
The website as well.
And membership is really cheap, $20 a year for an individual, $25 a year for a family. With that membership, you get a tax deduction, you get reduced price tickets to some of our events, you get our newsletter, which has pictures like the ones I just showed, telling you stories about San Leandro, and you get the knowledge that you personally are doing something to preserve San Leandro history.
Exactly. Do we still get pictures? Are people still kind of uncovering that kind of stuff?
We are still trying to collect pictures. We worked with the San Leandro History Museum last year to do a picture collecting project. We would love it if people would bring us their old photos. They think, oh, my photos are not history, but they are. Sure. And especially those photos from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s and 80s. Those are really important to collect now before they're gone. And we just started a project thanks to Serlene Grant, the first African American council member, and Dwayne Cornelius, who is the president of the African American Business Council, wanting to get some African American stories in the museum. Good. So we partnered with the museum staff and with the two of them, and we really need photos that will help us tell that story. So, and people to tell us that story. So.
Well, good. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing a bit of of what you do and the importance of the San Leandro Historical Society.
My pleasure.
I want to thank our viewing audience for digitally stumbling in here and listening to Talkable San Leandro. If you've enjoyed this, if you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up or do something, a nice comment would do wonders. Again, until the next time, keep up the conversation.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.